All right, so maybe let's kickstart today's session. Um, Before that, I just want to put an announcement that I've posted the GBA groups on our announcement website, in our tutorial group site. So, please reach out to your group members, especially for those who did not specify your group members, so you are randomly allocated. So please reach out to them as soon as possible to make sure that you establish connection. And then I think you cannot start the GBA yet, but yeah, at least exchange numbers and share your contacts. Right. And if you have any issues with your groupings, drop me an email and we can look into it. All right. So we're going to start the lecture. I'll just give you a broad overview of what we're going to cover today. So today you will see that there are actually two sets of slides. It's called lecture 2A and lecture 2B. So in our lecture today, for the 3 hours, we'll be covering only lecture 2A. And I've consolidated all the learning materials in lecture 2A. So I've reshuffled the slides compared to the lecture slides. So I reshuffle it so that all the content is covered in lecture 2A. And lecture 2B will be a mandatory so-called online lecture that you have to watch. I've posted the lecture already on our tutorial site. And basically, lecture 2B goes through all the questions, right? So I highly encourage you to watch the recording maybe next week during your the alternate weeks, right? Have a look at lecture 2B and you'll go through all the questions relating to the topic that covered today. All right, want to highlight again, it's a mandatory lecture recording that you have to watch. So you can watch it next week. All right. Any questions? Yeah, I think we're good. All right. So, before we go into the details of today's lecture, let's just think about what we're going to cover today, right? So, in the most simplest term, right, what we're covering today is the idea that money has different value based on which period the money is in. For example, the layman term is, if you have the money now, right, you have $100 now. Is it the same value as if you get $100 1 year later? And I hope you can, and the whole concept of today's analysis or calculations is to just tell you that in finance, we see that money received later is different from money received now, right? So imagine again, you receive $100 today versus $100 in 2025. This sum of money, even though it's $100, is worth different amount, right? So today we're just going to try to understand this concept and do many, many calculations. You'll see all the fancy stuff that's being done, but the whole idea of it is just that it's worth different amount, right? Okay, so with that in mind, let's kind of start the slides, right? So in finance, right, there are two kind of you kind of know that two kind of compoundings: simple interest and compound interest, right? And the idea of simple interest is simply means that you only get interest on the original principal. The original principal. Now, compound interest, probably you already know, got to know it through your secondary education, is that compound interest simply means you earn interest on the original principal or original investment, as well as on the interest as well, right? So there's a simple example here. And we suppose you have $100 in the bank, right? And you save it for 2 years. Now, in a simple interest sense, you only know that you are going to save for 2 years, right? So you're going to get a simple interest for 2 years plus $100 principal at the end of the 2 years. So it's $120. Now, on compound interest, we need to get the interest on the interest, which is why we get more. And we use this formula. Basically, we just take 100 multiply by 1.1 or 110%, because your interest is 10%, and square it, right? Meaning just do it twice. Okay. So in this course, you don't need to know anything about simple interest. There will be no questions asked about simple interest because finance, we are only concerned about compound interest. And this slide is basically just to show you, okay, there are two kinds of interest, but in finance, we are just really interested in compound interest, and everything after this, we all focus on compound interest. We will not talk about simple interest at all. All right. So this is a slide to actually explain to you the power of compounding when you get interest on interest. So for example, your great grandmother deposit $10 on you, right? For 5% interest 200 years ago. Now, how much will you have worth today? So because it's 5%, so it's 1 plus 0.05, but to the power of 200. You are compounding for 200 years. And this is the amount you get. Now, if we do it in simple interest, can you see that you only get $100 at the end of 200 years versus this 172,000 or 173,000 around that. So compound interest has added so much more. See, this 8, this 9, right? So we just take this amount minus this amount. This is the additional amount that compound interest has given you. So, hope we can see the moral story. Try to save early. A $10 saved 200 years ago will give you so much more, right? We can see that. So this is just to show you the power of compounding. Nothing too much here, just really to show you as you compound more and more years, the power of compounding increase exponentially at the end as the number of years goes by. As you can see here. Okay, so now after this slide, or after the example, everything is compound interest, right? So never use simple interest in anything relating to this course, or if you take subsequent finance courses, those that are specializing in finance, know that you will never use simple interest. Everything must be considered in compound interest. Okay. All right. So what does this mean? Number of compounding periods. All right. So if we take the compounding period in annual sense, annual means that every year, whether it's beginning of the year or at the end of the year or middle of the year, but every year there will be a compounding happening, right? So if it's an annual compounding, and this investment is $100, 10% for 2 years, you know that it will be compounded twice, right? Annually means that you compound twice. So you just do this, like what we saw earlier. Now, what's interesting is it is semi-annual compounding. Means what? Every 6 months, you're going to compound your investments, right? So when you do this, you need to take the 10%, now divide by 2. However, the number of compounding period has increased because you have 2 years times 2, right? Because you have 4 compounding periods. Compounding periods. Right? So you have more compounding periods now. So it becomes 4. Now, if you do it monthly, what happens? Instead of 2 or 4 here, now you need to times 12, right? Because each year you have 12 months. And so you take 12 times 2 is 24. So now you compound it 24 times. Of course, your rate you need to divide by 12 as well. Because now the 10% rate is per year basis. So now you need to divide by 12. Daily compounding, you need to divide by 360 now. Again, because it's 2 years, so 365. So because of 2 years, we need to take 365 times 2. Right? So this is a question for your, in terms of the compounding, annual, semi-annual, monthly, and daily, which do you think will give the largest value at the end of 2 years? Daily? Yeah, you're right. Daily. So you kind of understand, right? Yeah, I think all of you are correct. So daily compounding, because you're compounding so many more times, you get more money at the end of the 2 years. Perfect. You're right. I will not go through continuous compounding because this It's not really something you ever use for this course. Now, in terms of the rate, so just now we saw 10%. This 10% rate is an annual rate, right? So let's put a proper name to the rate. So we have this thing called annual percentage rate or APR, and this gives you the nominal rate. Okay, so maybe the question is, what is nominal rate? So nominal rate is basically the rate that is quoted by law. And the idea is that if you notice, I mean, just flip back to the other slide. If you notice, what happened is that when we take semi-annual, we divide by 2, right? So this 10% divided by 2 actually has a name. So the 10% that we use is called the nominal rate. And when we divide by 2, which is number of periods, we get this thing called periodic rate. So there are two rates now, nominal rate, which is what is being quoted, and periodic rate, which is what we have divided. And then use that periodic rate to actually compound it accordingly. Now, there's an example here. So what is the nominal rate or APR if the monthly rate is 0.5%? So if it's monthly, you know APR is on the full year, you take 0.5 times 12, you get 6%. Now, what is the APR or nominal rate? If the semi-annual rate is 0.5, so take 0.5 times 2 is 1%. Now, what is the monthly rate if the APR is 12 with monthly compounding? So this part of the question, right, is trying to emphasize to you something. When you have an APR, it is tagged to a certain type of compounding. So for this APR, it's based on monthly compounding. So we can actually find the monthly periodic rate. So we simply take 12 divided 12% divided by 12 means that the period rate, periodic rate is 1%, as you can see here. Now, the question I'd like to ask you, can you take the above rate, which is this 12%, divide by 2 to get the semi-annual rate? In your opinion, I mean, the answer is below, but do you think you can actually do that? Okay, yeah, I guess it's the answer is below. It's the idea is no, and I hope you can see why. Because usually semi-annual rate is slightly lower than annual rate. You are right. Now, so I hope you can see that for the APR of 12%, this 12% here is being pegged to a certain type of compounding, and in this sense, monthly compounding. And so it means that we can only calculate the periodic rate on monthly basis. Now, if we want a semi-annual rate, we need the APR in semi-annual compounding basis, right? So we need a separate rate, and then we can calculate the periodic rate on monthly semi-annual basis, right? So the type of APR is tagged to the type of compounding being used. So I hope you can see that no, you can't do this. You need a APR based on semi-annual compounding to find the semi-annual periodic rate. I'll pause here for a short while. Any questions? Right. None so far. Okay, very good. So next, moving on to effective annual rate. So just now we saw that we have investments that can compound semi-annually. There's investments that could be compound monthly. So the idea is, how do we compare these investments, right? If we have one investment that's compound semi-annual, one is compound monthly, the only way to compare the investments now is to actually calculate this called effective annual rate. And there's this formula given here. And the idea of the whole effective annual rate is that we want to express the rate based on, or not really based on, but as if the the entire investment is just compounded once. That's why we use this thing called effective annual rate. So it's as if it's being compounded once. And so we just take the nominal divided by m, which is number of compounding periods, plus 1 to the power of number of compounding periods m, and you take minus 1. Okay. So there's an example given here. For example, we have a semi-annual compounding, right? And then we are given an APR nominal is 10. So let's plug in the values as given here. And we find that the effective rate that you're actually getting because of the semi-annual compounding is actually more than 10%, which makes sense because you're compounding more, you compound it twice instead of just one time, meaning that you are getting effectively actually 10.25%. Right? So we can use the formula as given here, right? We have two examples. Imagine you have a saving account, a daily compounding, and then we have 5.25. Now, I encourage you to use Excel because in your final exam or any other quizzes, Excel is allowed. So be very familiar with Excel and how to use the various formulas, right? And we'll cover them in class as well today. So for Excel, you want to calculate effective interest rate, you can actually just use the EFF ECT formula. You plug in the nominal rate that's given, and you plug in the number of compounding periods, which is 365, and you get the same answer. Right? So I encourage you to use Excel, given that you can use it. And there will be certain formulas that you cannot use Excel, and I'll point out to you which one they are. But for an effective annual rate, just use Excel. Right? And so we have another 5.3%, but now we're doing a semi-annual. So same thing, let's just plug in the Excel formula. However, number of compounding periods just put it as 2. So now we have this thing called the rule of 72. So before we go into all this explanation, I want to highlight to you that the rule of 72 is a approximation. So I'm just going to write here approx, APPROX. So it's approximation, meaning that when you see a question, just be very mindful of what they're asking. If they say calculate something, right? Calculate a value, please do not use the rule of 72 because your calculate means that you're supposed to come up with a value, right? Now, if you see a question asking approximate the value of whatever, right? Then use the rule of 72. Okay. So what is this rule of 72? It simply says, yeah, so it's really an interest. It simply says or it's a rule that says that the number of years to double investment is given by a certain rate. And the number of years, right, to double investment, you just simply take 72, divide by the interest rate that you have. And this will give you a number of years. But this is the pure approximation. I highlight again. So for example, you have 12% interest. You just take 72 divided by 12, and it gives you around 6 years to double your money. Right? Again, approximation. Now, the question is, to double your money in 5 years, how much interest do you need? You just take 72 divided by 5, means that you approximately require 14.5% interest per year to double your money in 5 years. Right? Okay, so that is a bit of the background. Now let's really go into the idea of time value of money. That whole idea that we talk about how money that you receive today is worth different amount received 1 year later, right? The $100 that we talk about. So let's try to understand this here. So because we're in a finance course, right, we always need to think that if you receive a money today, this money can invest it, right? You can put in a fixed deposit, you can invest it to earn more money, which is why the money received at different period of time will worth different amount. Now I have a question for all of you. If you can receive the money today versus if you can receive the money 2 years later, with this concept, where would you prefer to receive the money now or later? Today. Now. Perfect. You're right. So you can see that because if you receive the money now, you can take the money and invest it, right? To earn more money. And so you are totally right. And so this is the basis of today. So I hope that, before we go into all the details, always remind yourself, money is worth different amount. Regardless of how complex the question might be or how complex you might face a question, never shift money between different timeline. What does it mean? Today is time zero. Never shift this 100. Say, oh, I shift the 100 here. It's still worth 100. It's never worth 100. So questions along the way can be quite complex. But always keep this in mind. Money is worth different amount in different time period. So if it's 1 year later, this 100 would not be worth 100. You know that it's for sure worth something else. And then we'll try to calculate what's the value. We know that if we receive 100 at year 3 here, is not worth 100, right? So always remind yourself that. Okay. And so with this concept of investing the 100 today, as you can see here, we kind of derive this idea of future value. So for example, what's happening here? We have 100. We invest the 100 for 1 year, will give us this. So in 1 year time, your money is worth 104. This is assuming a 4% interest. Now, in year 2, because we are working with compound interest, remember I say just forget about simple interest already. Everything is compound interest. Because of compound interest, we compound it, it becomes 108, and we compound it for third year, it becomes 112.49. Right? So this is the calculation for future value, right? So what is your investment worth in this sense 3 years later? Okay. So we have a simple question here. Suppose we want to buy Manhattan Island for $24 in 1626, quite long ago. Calculate the future value of $24 if we have to invest it for 393 years. Right? So we can plug in the value, and no interest is 10%. We can plug it in and we will get 24 to times 1.1 plus 10% to a power of 393. Now, with this simple example, let me see. Okay, I want to show you how to do it in Excel. Let me just show you in Excel. Hope you can see my screen. So we're going to solve the same question, but in Excel now, right? So if you do have Excel, try to follow me, pull out your Excel as well to follow along so that you can try this example. So same example, we are trying to find the future value, right? So pull out your Excel. Let's find the FV, future value. Now they ask you for rate, as you can see here, rate. So the rate given the question is 10%, so 0.1. So always put it in decimal, right? Your rate is always in decimal. Now, number of periods, we know that it's going to compound it for 393 years. So let's put 393. Payment, let's put at 0 first. We'll cover what's payment later, but let's put it at 0 now. The present value, PV. So PV is the present value, which is what you have to pay. Let's put it as 24, is correct, 24, but I want to put it as negative 24, and I'll explain to you in a bit. Right? Now, type end of period, meaning that you only consider the compounding at the end of each year, right? So, like for example, end of year 1, there's a compounding of 1 time, end of year 2, compounding of 1 time, etc. I hope you can see that you get the same answer given in the question. Here, right? 4.4 times 10 to the power of 17 given here. Any issues on this, on Excel? Any questions? Okay, no questions. Let me just All right. Okay. All right. What is the exact order? So you have to follow the Excel formula, what they ask for. So in that example that we just saw in for FV, they ask you for the rate first, followed by the year. So just really follow the formula that as you go along, right? Then followed by PMT, and this is called payment. But I will put it at zero now. I'll explain to you in the next few slides what is it, and then you will have a better idea. And next one is PV, right? PV is negative 24. And I'll explain to you why negative in this slide here. And last but not least, the type, which is zero. So each formula has their own way of putting it. So just follow what Excel prompt you to put, and you just put the values. Yes, it does make a difference when you change it end and beginning. And we'll see that what's the difference in a bit, right? We'll have a look at that. So just hold that thought in your mind. We'll go through the difference as well. Okay, that's a good question. All right. So now cash flow. So we always encourage you to draw a timeline whenever you face a time value of money question. As you can see here, the timeline always starts with zero as now, and then 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, or 1, 2, 3. Right? Time today is zero. Time 1 year from now is time 1. Now, there's a convention that I want to highlight here, which is going to relate to why I put a negative. So, a simple way of thinking about this, when money is going into your pocket, it's a positive. When money is going out of your pocket, it's negative. Okay, always reference your own pocket. Okay, I repeat again, this is important. When money is going into your pocket, it's positive. When money is going out of the pocket, it's negative. And what does this mean? Let's look at this question here. The previous question. Can you see that you bought Manhattan Island for $24? So is this a negative or positive to you? Negative. Perfect. You're right. So that is why in that formula, I put a negative. Okay. At the end of the day, when you calculated your FV, you get a positive figure, which makes sense, right? Because money is going in your pocket now because you can sell it off for this amount. So that's how I like to remember when we put negative and positive. I want to highlight the importance because it will really affect your figure at the end of the day. So do not guess, oh, maybe this is positive, maybe this is negative. Don't guess. Always just know, take the reference on where the money is going. Is it in or out of your pocket? And if it's in, positive or negative. Okay, always, I want to highlight that we'll only cover the Excel method. The rest of the ways we will not be covering it. Okay. So financial calculators, unfortunately for this course, we have stopped covering the content for financial calculators. Previously, I used to cover it. However, the school's stand is that we want to focus on Excel since everyone's using Excel now. Okay. Okay. This is for you to have a look. Now, having covered future value, then what is present value now? So present value is just basically the reverse of future value in the sense that if you receive, let's say, let's draw a timeline here now. As we know, we start with 0, 1, 2, 3, 3 is the year. If you receive $100 in year 2, then the question is, how much does this $100 worth now? In this sense, we need to do the present value already. So this is the idea of present value. So how do we bring these $100 back? And so we can use this formula. Basically, you just take the FV divided by the 1 plus the rate and the number of periods. Okay? It's just the inverse of the FV. We do have a question in a bit. So how much is 103 to be received next year worth today? So you are receiving this 103, this 103 only next year, right? So you take 103, divide by 1 plus 3% to the power of 1 is $100. Okay, so this is the manual method. We can use Excel to do it as well. I would like to use the next example to show you how to do it in Excel. So you have just bought a new computer for 3,000. The payment is due in 2 years, so you do not pay anything. Okay? It's due in 2 years. You can earn 8% of your money. How much money should you set aside today in order to make payment when it's due in 2 years' time? Okay, so let's pull out Excel now again. If you have Excel, please follow me. Let me share my screen on Excel. Okay, so now I'm going to pull out my PV formula here. Because now I'm looking at present value, right? The question is, how much money should you set aside today in order to make the payment? So let's pull out the PV formula. And as you can see here, the PV is based, they have prompted you what to add in. So the first thing you ask you add in is the rate, which is 0.08. Again, I want to highlight to you that you must use in decimal. Please don't put 8%, put 0.08. Now, number of periods, we know that it is due in 2 years. Let's put that 2. Let the PMT, let's put it at 0 first. We'll cover it in a few slides time. Let's put PMT at 0. Okay. So now, future value. Should this be a negative future value in terms of 3,000, or should be a positive? Okay, you're right. So because you need to pay in 2 years' time, right? So it's negative. Type, I'm just going at 0, end of period. Okay. So this is the amount of money that you have to set aside now. Okay. Hope you can see this. Any questions? Okay. Yeah, okay, sure. I'll go through it again. So let's try that again. So I have my PV formula. Okay, I have my PV formula. Now, you have the question in front of you, so you can look at the question. So the PV formula asks you to first put on what is the rate. So based on the question, you earn 8% on your money, means the rate is 8%, right? So 0.08 for 8%. Now, number of periods. You're going to put the money in for 2 years. So the number of periods is 2. Okay. Now PMT is 0. So maybe you have a question, why is it 0? PMT means payment. Is there an interim payment? In this sense, there's no interim payment. And we'll cover this idea of payment in just a bit. So do not worry about it. Just put it at 0 now. Right? Just know that it's a 0. But we'll cover in a bit. Okay. Now, FV is the one that's given the question. You need to make payment for computer of negative 3,000. Now, the type at the end of the day is 0 because your compounding only happens at the end of the year, end of each year. So it's 0, right? And we'll have an example later to show you what happens if it's beginning, right? But if the question did not say, it's always assumed that compounding is at the end of the year. Only if the question say beginning, then it becomes beginning, right? If it doesn't say anything, assume as end of period. And this is what you have. That's all. So I hope you can see this. Okay, yeah. So what happens if it's month? So don't worry, we have a question on this as well. So basically, it's not decimal, but then if it's in months, we just need multiply. We have an example to show you in a bit. Okay. I see a question. Do we still have to write formulas in the exam? So no. So in the exam, you can write it like this, like this. You will still get the full marks. So you don't have to write the formula given. Okay, then you get this. Right? Okay. Now we do have another question. Suppose you borrow 200 pesos for 1 year. Interest rate is at 12%. You and your lender agree that the interest on the loan will be, 12% times 200,000, which is this amount. So the lender deducts the interest amount from the loan upfront. Okay, it's upfront, we'll start here, and gives you this. Before doing any calculation, question, what's wrong with this? What's wrong with doing it this way? Anyone would like to give it a try? You can type in the group chat or even unmute yourself. What's wrong with doing it this way? It makes sense, right? 200,000. Oh, since I give there's an interest of 12%, I might as well take the interest first. What's wrong?
Chong Ye
Yeah.
here. So I think it's because the 200, the interest, right, that you deduct the 24K, interest is based on 200,000 pesos, but then you only receive 176 upfront. So like the interest will be different, because your initial sum is different.
Okay, that makes sense. Yeah, you're about there, but what's the issue here? I think someone wrote something. You are paying the future value in the current period. So I think you're right, Chong Wei. But then the issue is exactly what I think Joshua is saying, right? You're paying the future value in the current period. So what does this mean? It means that actually you only need to pay the interest 1 year later, right? But how come you're paying the interest immediately? And so this will cause a difference. And so let's try to calculate this difference. Okay. You are making a loss. Yeah, right. You're actually making a loss. So in this question, they say the interest rate is 12%, but actually it might not be 12%. So let's pull up your Excel again. Okay, I'm going to share my screen. I'll be toggling between Excel and my slides. Okay. So I'm sharing my screen now. Let's try to understand this. In order to do so, let's use the rate formula here. Okay, so I encourage you to follow me to try this formula so that you are competent and know how to use Excel to calculate the various numbers. Okay, use the rate formula, plot your rate formula. Now, number of periods, NPR is number of periods, is 1, right? They are talking about 1 year, right? Investing in 1 year. Now, PMT, again, I'm going to put 0. Like I mentioned, we'll talk about PMT in a couple of slides. Okay. Next one, PV. Can you see PV? Present value. So how much are you getting now? Anyone would like to give a try? How much are you getting the money now? Okay, and is it positive or negative? Positive, you're right. So you're right. So 1, 7, 6, 1, 2, 3. You're positive because you're getting money, right? Now, in the future, what are you getting? How much do you have to pay back? Negative, you're right. Now it's negative because you have to pay back 200,000. Again, the type I'm going to put at 0. Gas, you don't have to care about it. Gas, we'll talk about it in just a bit, but not important. Usually, you just ignore it. Okay. We'll talk about gas in the lecture 3 or lecture 4. Okay. So just gas, you don't have to care about it at all at that moment. Don't even put any number. Just ignore it. Okay. I hope you have all gotten this on your Excel. Now, once you have gotten this, I'm going to click enter. Can you see that the rate here? Yes, you're right. You're using the rate formula to find interest rate. So can you see that the actual interest rate based on this formulation, 1 year, receiving 176,000 now, and later paying off 200,000 later, is the interest rate of this setup is actually 13.6% compared to what is written at 12% in the question. Yeah. Oh, how come yours show 14? Because you need to expand the percentage. So if yours is like this, it's 14, then you can click this. Put 2 DP. Okay. I hope you can see that what's the issue here is exactly what your friend was saying, right? That actually the interest you're supposed to pay later, 1 year later, but you're going to pay it now. And so it goes back to the whole idea that money is worth different amount now compared to later. So whenever you anyhow shift the money, the actual rate or the actual amount that you have paid is more. So in this sense, you're actually paying more by allowing them to deduct the interest immediately upfront. And so with this in mind, right, I want to highlight to you that next time, or even some of you are, starting to buy a HDB, starting buy a house, and go into like looking at mortgages and this kind of thing. So be very careful on how they deduct your interest. If let's say they say I'm going to loan you 100,000, but I'm going to deduct your first month interest immediately or first year interest immediately, you know that actually the interest rate will be higher already. Okay, this is a perfect example to show you in a simple sense. Okay. All right. So what's wrong here? What's wrong here is because you're paying around 14% instead of 12%. Okay, so we have seen very different kind of terminologies. We can see that thing like discount rate, cost of capital, cost of money. So they all refers to the same thing, and it depends on the usage. And we'll see various examples as we go along how they use different terms for it, but they all refer to the same thing. So don't worry. As well as as the course progresses in lecture 3, lecture 4, we'll kind of explain in detail what individual terms means. But now, if you see various different terms, they all refer to interest rate. Okay, so do not worry. Now, this is just formalized like to actually tell you what time value of money is. You do not need to remember this slide at all. They will never ask you to define what is time value of money. This is just to formalize and just explain to you money, because of this concept of time value of money, in layman terms means money is worth different in different period of time. That's why we need to consider when we receive the money. Okay. So this one, I'm not ask you this question again. How much would you prefer to receive 1,000 today or 1,000 1 year later? I hope all of you all know it's today, right? You want the money now, right? Because you can invest it somewhere else. So this is the important part. You need to adjust the cash flow in different period of time. So in just now the example of the pesos example, you can see that if you straight away deduct the interest, it actually makes a difference, right? Because the interest amount actually is worth more today than if you pay the interest 1 year later. Okay, so this is the important part. Whenever you shift cash flow between different periods, you need to consider the interest, right? You cannot just anyhow shift like what you saw in the rates. Okay. Some implications of time value of money. There's this thing called capital budgeting. Don't worry, we will go into a lot of detail in the lecture 3 or 4, and then valuation we'll do it today. And of course, your personal financing you need to look at time value of money as well. Okay, so we have a question here. Suppose you have a 1-year-old son and you'd like to provide 7,500 in 17 years towards his education. You currently have 5,000 invested. What interest rate must you earn to have 75,000 when you need it? Okay, so again, I'm going to quickly pull up my Excel. Now I'm going to do quickly. So I hope you can follow me. Okay, I'm just going to not as slow as what we did previously, but I hope you can follow along. So let's plot the rate formula, right? In this question, we need to provide your son with 75,000 17 years later. All right, so number of periods 17 years. Payment, again, I'm going to put as 0. We'll talk about it later. Now, what's the present value? Anyone like to shout out, type in a group chat? Okay, is it a negative or positive? Negative, yeah, you're right. I hope everyone can see. is a negative 5,000 because this money is going out of your pocket to be invested, right? Negative 5,000. What is the final value? So final value is how much? Yep. Okay, 75 and it's a positive. I hope everyone can see it's a positive. Okay, type again, question do not say anything, means end of period, 0. That's all. Yeah, positive. And there you go, 17%. And if you expand this, we get 17.27%. Okay.
Prof, sorry, can I check why is
Yeah.
it 17 years instead of 16 years? Because he's currently 1 year old, right? Then you need it at 17.
You want to provide in 17 years.
Oh, in
So
17 years. Oh, okay. I thought yes,
yes.
when he's
Yeah. Yeah. But good question. Yeah, you must be very careful because sometimes, right, when that's a very good point. Thanks for pointing out. Like when you read questions, be very careful how they phrase the question. So, yes, because this is in 17 years, so yeah, 17. But let's say they say in when he's age 17, there's a different way. Then it's 16 years, right? Because he's in 17 years. Great question. Okay. Okay, so percentage, you can leave it in 2dp, 1 or 2dp is fine, right? So you shouldn't round off to the nearest whole value. So always do 1 or 2dp. Okay, all right. So I'll not go through using the table because you'll never use it. You always use Excel. All right. So the next part of discussion, right? So we have done a few formulas, right? We have done things like PV, present value, future value. We have used the rate formula. Now, remember in all the example, what we have discussed is always saying that hey, let's put PMT as 0, right? I keep on saying PMT equals to 0. Now we're going to tackle this. What's PMT? So what's PMT? So the idea of PMT is that what happens if there are cash flows, C1 mean cash flows that are coming in during the period of time. So there are money that's coming in, and this all going out. If there's money coming in or money going out, this is the portion where we have to tackle the PMT already. All right. So we have an example to explain to you how it works. Okay. So now we need to put values at the PMT, right? It's no longer 0. So let's have a look at this example here. So your auto dealer gives you a choice to pay 15500 cash now, or to make 3 payments of 8,000, not sure, or to make 3 payments. The payments are 8,000 now, 4,000 at the end of the 2 following years. Okay, your cost of money is 8%. Which do you prefer? All right, so let's see. Option 1, you have 15500 today. Okay. Option 2, you pay 8,000 today and 4,000 in the next 2 years. So let's draw a timeline here. So let's draw a timeline. 0, 1, 2, 3, right? We are going to make 8,000 today. I'm just going to put 8 here. We're going to make 4,000 2 years, 2 years. So 4, 4, right? And we know these are payments, so it's negative to you. Negatives, right? So there's no year 3. Okay, so this is the timeline that we're using. Now, I'm going to just pull up my Excel. I encourage you to follow me to actually work out this solution. Okay, so the Excel is the solution is provided below. So I'm not going to format it nicely. I'm just going to do it quickly, right? So cash flow, PV, right? So we have period 0, 1, 2. So what's happening? We do have a negative 8,000, negative 4,000, and negative 4,000, right? The various cash flow. Now, do we need to present value the first period? No, yeah, it's already the present, right? It's already the present. Okay, I hope everyone can see it's no, because it's already the present. Okay, sorry, this is 1,000. Now, we need to present value the next period. So let's present value this. What is the rate at 8%, so 0.08 number of periods? I'm just going to click this because this is already given at 1. In this example, I'm not going to use the payment function. So, because this is just a PV, I'm just going to present value individual payments. So I'm not going to use the payment function. So I'll just put at 0 here. Okay. The future value is this, all right? And the type again is 0. So I hope you can see, you get this. Now I just pull the formula down, I get this, right? Again, I repeat why I did not add, why did not put payment at all, because we are just going to present value individual payments, right? There's a faster way to use the payment, this payment formula here, but because we are just trying, I'm just trying to illustrate to you that, let's just do the method that we have learned earlier using present value. And in this sense, what is the total? So total is this one I need to put a negative because we know that the cash flows are negative. So let's just put a negative here. Okay, so the total is just this plus this plus this, right? 15,133. Okay, what's the difference? Now, because our timeline, it's always from 0. So the convention is the timeline always starts from 0. 0 means now. So we always have to start from 0, right? And in this question, they say 8,000 is paid now. It means that it's placed on the period 0. Okay, so always start with 0. This is the convention for all questions, right? Always 0, and look at questions where is the payment coming from. And so we get this answer here. Okay. Now, another way of doing it, okay, I hope everyone can understand this. Another way of doing it that I like to show you is this thing called NPV. So now we have learned a few formulas, right? PV, FV, rate, and now let's do this NPV. So the idea of NPV, right, is that if I have multiple cash flows, I can actually make it simpler. I don't have to do it manually like this, and then add up like that. I can do the NPV. And how does NPV work? The first thing they ask you is rate. So let's put the rate at 0.08. Now they ask you to put values, right? Can you see all the values here? And so how to do it is that you drag the values that you're interested in. Now, the NPV formula basically is a simple method of using PV. And you notice when you do the PV, you did not include PV the first cash flow at period 0, right? You did not do a PV on that. The NPV use the same formulation. So whenever you drag the values for NPV, do not drag in the selection in period 0. This is very important. I repeat again. Whenever you do the NPV formula, because it is a derivation of the PV formula, as you can see in the PV formula, we did not consider cash period 0. NPV, same. You don't consider it. So we put only period 1 onwards. Okay. We get this. Now, what do? We just add back this, the 8,000. And you get this. So let me just type formula text. Formula text is here. So formula text basically gives you the formula that I've used, right? So I hope you can see I have NPV these two, period 1 and period 2, and then I've just added back the period 0, which is exactly what I did here, right? So for the sum, I just add this, and period 0, because period 0 need not be present value at all. So the NPV formula uses the same concept. Any questions on this?
Prof, can I see the present value formula again?
Yeah, sure. So let me just type the formula text. So in your slides, you should also see the formulas as per the screenshots. So at the end of the day, the question is, should you select option 1 or option 2? And why? Yeah, option 2, because you pay lesser when you consider the present value of the amount you pay. You're right. Pay option 2, right? Because at the moment, if you present value everything, your option 2 is 15133. But if you option 1, your present value is 15500. So it's lesser. You're right, lesser.
Oh, sorry, for the present value, why is it you put minus PV instead of just PV?
Oh, okay. So why is it minus? Is because when I put PV is a positive, but we know that even with PV, a negative cash flow, it cannot become positive, right? So we put a negative here.
Okay, can. Thank you.
Yeah. No, welcome. Okay. So we have another question. Let's look at the question in the slides. So we have a broker that calls you to tell you that he has a great investment opportunity. You invest $100 today, receive $40 1 year, and 75 2 years. If you require 15% return on investment, should you take this investment? Okay. So I'm just going to draw a timeline for you. I really encourage you to draw the timeline whenever you solve this kind of question. Okay. So I'm just going to put 0, 1, 2. We know that in this investment, we are going to receive $40 in year 1, $40, and 75 in year 2. Okay. So there are 2 investments happening here. Now, this time I'm just going to do a bit quicker on Excel. Hope you can follow me or even try on your own. So I have my Excel here. Now I'm just going to erase all this. Okay, $40. And you receive, right? So it's positive, huh? So it's positive $40. $75 in year 2. We know that the required return is 15%. So I do need to amend this a little. 15%. 15%. Again, I want to do both methods. I'll do NPV as well, but I need to adjust it to 15%. We don't need to add the first value because there's nothing in here. There's nothing here, right? So don't need to care about this. So can you see that both is 91, 91. Okay, why not? Yeah, why not? Okay, so you can do that as well. You can do that as well. So both method works. Yeah, same question. So this in this, you can do this, or what you can do is you put negative 100 here. All right, and then you plus this. Okay. So you can make a comment to say that you can see that, oh, if you're going to invest 100 but only getting back 40 and 75, means that you're actually getting less. So you shouldn't do it. So you can argue, you can put a negative here and say this, that is negative, so it's not good. Or let's say I put 0, you can argue that, oh, the present value of the 2 cash flow is 91, but you're investing 100. So between 91 and 100 is you're getting less, right? So both ways are fine. You can do both ways, whether you put the 100, negative 100, or the 0.
Prof, at this point, do we still put the minus PV?
At this point, we don't have to.
Okay.
Let me just see whether we.
Because
Oh,
the money
actually, we
come.
do have to. We do have to. If not, you will be negative.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
But
you do have to.
okay, but because the cash flow, the money is coming in, so it's positive. But if you positive on the formula, then you get negative, is it?
Yeah, that's right. That's right. So you have to, yeah. So, at the end of the day, right, when to put the negative, when to put positive, right? Just think about this. So think of it logically, right? Whenever you do a PV formula, like here, right? Think of it. Okay, I'm PVing a cash flow. And at the end of the day, you're receiving this money, right? You're receiving $40 in year one, meaning $34 present value. Since you're receiving, it cannot be negative. So whenever you see a number, try to make a bit of like thinking like, oh, okay, does this make sense? So I hope you can see that it only makes sense if it's positive,
So I can like
right?
see the number first, then if it's like doesn't make sense for it to be negative, then I can just go and times the minus sign.
Yeah, yeah,
Okay.
totally. Yeah. So in this sense, it's uh wrong. I mean, in the sense that broker is charging you more. Okay. Okay, I want to highlight again, there are two methods, the MPV method and the PV method. Generally, whenever you have cash flows that are different amount, like this 40 instead of 5, or like the previous one, generally people like to use the MPV formula because it's simpler, it's easier to do it, right? You just drag on the component. So generally people use the MPV formula. So you also do not need to worry too much if you use MPV formula regarding the negative or positive. So if you can use MPV formula, try to use it. Okay. I think it's 8 p.m. already. You know what? Let's take a short break. We come back at 8:15. Um, and then we continue the discussion. Right. Yeah, sure. I will explain the PMT again after the break. And if any questions, feel free to put it in the group chat. Okay. Okay. So welcome back, welcome back. So I think we have a question. Can you explain the PMT again? Okay, so so far, right, we have not really used the PMT formula, um, even though we have multiple cash flows yet. So um, I would like to explain it in just a bit, right? In a few more slides, we have an example to show you actually using a PMT formula. Okay, and hopefully that one will make more sense. But just before we do that, let's cover a bit on perpetuity first, and then later we will go into details on the PMT formula. Okay, um, but I just want you to understand that for the PMT formula, why we did not put in the PMT values is because when you notice the two examples that we have seen here, the values of the cash flows are different. In this example, we have $40 and $75. In the previous cash flow, we have 8,000, 4,000 and 4,000. So it's different, which is why we cannot use the PMT formula. We can use it if the cash flows are the same. And we'll see an example regarding that in a bit. Okay. So let's hold that thought for a while. Now, before we go into the PMT formula, let's talk about perpetuity. Okay, so what is a perpetuity? A perpetuity basically means that a cash flow that happens forever each year. Okay, so it doesn't stop. One example of a perpetuity is a perpetual bond, right? So a perpetual bond means that there's no maturity of the bond, and the bond will keep on giving you money forever. Okay, I know some of you might not understand what is a bond. Again, we'll come to that in a bit. Let's talk about the perpetuity formula first. We'll have a whole slide on what is a bond, right? Basically, just think of a bond as a financial instrument, and a perpetual bond basically is a financial instrument that gives you money forever. Okay, let's just put it as that first, and then we'll discuss what is a bond in just a bit. So whenever you have a perpetuity, the formula is very simple. You simply take the cash flow amount, C, divide by what's the discount rate. And this is your formula for perpetuity. And the PV of the perpetuity is just cash flow divided by discount rate, regardless of how many cash flow. Because remember, this number of cash flow is forever, right? There is no Excel for this, so you need to use the formula. Okay, you need to know this formula for a start here. Now, there's the important part here is that the first payment for perpetuity starts one period from now. So what does this mean? Let's draw the timeline to understand, right? Remember, the convention of timeline starts with 0, which is now 1, 2, and 3. The idea is that the perpetuity C, the cash flow that you get from here, CCC, constant cash flow, is always 1 year from now. So you do not get any C from here. Okay, the formula makes the assumption. So you need to ensure this. Okay. We have a simple example to explain what it means. For example, you have a British consul, which is a government perpetual bond. It promised to give you 15% each year forever, right? At 10% interest rate. Okay. So you get 15 from year 1, 2, and 3. And so what is the perpetuity present value? You just take 15 divided by 0.01. And the value of your perpetuity, the present value of perpetuity, is 150. Okay. So again, this you need to use the formula. Now, this example, I love this example because it really shows you the meaning of one period from today. So let's look at this example here. In order to create an endowment, which pays 100K per year forever, how much money must you set aside today if the interest rate is 10%? Okay. So for the first part is the first payment starts 1 year from today. Remember, the perpetuity formula says that the cash flow must be 1 year from today. So it meets the criteria. Sorry, it meets the criteria already, right? So very simple. We just take this divided by 10% or 0.1. Okay. And this gives you 1 million. Now we have another second part of the question. First payment starts 3 years from today. So now what I'm going to do here, I'm going to draw a full timeline. Okay, so 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, plus dot, 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 right? We have forever. So it goes on forever. Now, first payment starts 3 years from today means what? The payment starts here, right? I've just put C as payment, cash flows, right? So your payment starts from year 3. Okay, so when we use the perpetuity formula, the perpetuity formula takes into account 1 year from today, right? So what does this mean? All the cash flows are being discounted to year 2, 1 year from today. And so the perpetuity formula, the PV given by the perpetuity formula is as of year 2. So we take this, divide by 10%, which is exactly what we have calculated earlier. Okay, equals to 1 million, right? But this 1 million value is as of year 2. Anyone have any question on this? Do you understand why is it as of year 2? Because I repeat again. So why is it as of year 2? Is because I'm just going to flip back, right? The convention of the perpetuity formula, not convention, the requirement of using this present value of perpetuity formula says that the cash flow must start 1 year from today. 1 year from today. Now, in this example, it's quite easy because your today is 0. So you just start 1 year from today, right? In the first part of this example, your first payment starts 1 year from today as it meets the requirement of the formula. Perfect. Very simple. Apply the formula. Now, the second part says the first payment starts 3 years from today. Right? I hope you can see that because it's 3 years from today, means that the cash flows are coming in year 3, year 4, year 5, year 6, year 7, year 8, all the way. And it means that what is the period now? What is the today? Today, it is at year 2, right? Because it's one period from there. So everything, when you use the perpetuity formula, you are actually discounting your cash flow in year 3, year 4, year 5, all back to year 2. And so in year 2, your present value of your perpetuity in year 2 is 1 million, given by this. I repeat again, the present value of your perpetuity in year 2, given by the perpetuity formula that we have seen, is 1 million. But this is not the end of the question because this is in year 2. But the question is, how much should you set aside today, right? Today is year 0. So what must you do? You must take 1 million divided by 1 plus 10% squared, right? Basically, you need to present value it by 2 years. How do you get 2 years? Can you see? 1, 2. You need to hop back 2 years, right? So that you are in today. So this will give you what is the value of your perpetuity today. Right? So I hope you're able to appreciate the importance of respecting the requirement of the formula. So the perpetuity formula, you can only use it if the cash flow happens one period from today. Now, in the second part of the question, it says the cash flow happens in 3 years from today. Unfortunately, it's 3 years, but you can still use it. However, you discount it only back to year two, and from year two, you need to do a manual present value, as seen here, or you can use the present value formula in Excel to do it as well. So I think if it's 3 years, meaning that the cash flow starts in year four, right? You're talking about year four, then you cube it. You're right. So you need to cube it.
Prof,
So the first,
I just
yeah,
want so basically, if I want to get 100K per year, then I want it to say start on year 3 or year 4. If it's year 4 lah, then year 4 will take reference to the total amount I have in year 3. So means by year 3 I die, then I need to hit 1 million lah. Then I just book backwards. Is my logic correct?
yes, correct. But then when you discount the 1 million, you need to discount it by divide
Yeah.
it by one plus, yeah, to cube it lah, basically
Yeah,
cube it.
thank you.
Yes, you're right. So if the question says starts 4 years from today, you need to cube it. But I hope you don't memorize, oh, 4 years from today you cube it. Because questions can come out anyway, but I hope you understand the the logic is that the formula requires the cash flow 1 year from today. And so if it starts in year four, just erase this. If it starts in year four, means that when you use the formula, basically everything, I'm just going to erase it. If it starts in year four, means that everything will be discounted to year three, right? So everything is 1 year from today, because the cash flow only starts in year four, means that once you get the value of 1 million here, you need to take 1 million, cube it here, right? Cube it. It starts here.
Prof, sorry, one more
Yeah.
question. If say the question asks in such a way that so you want to create endowment and then you need to get 100K per year, and then the payment starts from the fourth year. Then they also say like, however, at the third year you have a mature, you will have an investment that matures that will give you 400K. Then take like what? Say like if you want it on your fourth year, then you take the 1 million minus the 400K, then you'll get 600K. Then you need to PB the 600K. Is it something like that? Will the
Yeah.
question ask something
Yeah.
like that?
Yeah, you're right. So let's say you have a separate cash flow that's happening. Yeah, then you need to deduct the amount. You're right. Then it could be the whole thing. Yeah.
Will they ask something like that, or that has never come up before?
Uh, Actually, this kind of questions, right, is very creative one. So like the writers of the questions usually come up with a lot of different scenarios. So that's why usually I strongly discourage anyone from like memorizing it. So you really just need to know the concept, and then you need to try to figure out from there, because the questions will never repeat themselves usually. They always
Okay.
come with very different creative ways to test this kind of time value of money questions. Yeah. Okay. Okay, so we talked about perpetuity. Now let's talk about growing perpetuity. So just now we see that the cash flow are constant, right? C. Now, what happens now if the cash flow keep on growing every year? And this growth is given by this G called growth rate. Okay, growth rate G. And so the thing is, with the growth rate, again, the formula is quite simple for growing perpetuity. You just take C divided by R, but you need to minus G here. Again, we are deriving this formula from the perpetuity formula. So C must happen 1 year from today, same requirement. At the same time, your G must be less than R, right? If your G is more than R, you have a negative, you have a lot of issues. The formula doesn't work. So it's a requirement that G is less than R. And the thing is that you need to memorize this formula. So there's no Excel to do it. You need to memorize this formula for growing perpetuity. C divided by R minus G. Okay. Again, I think I want to highlight that if I'm not wrong, the exam, the tests are all open book. So again, when I say you need to memorize, you don't really need to memorize. You just need to jot it aside, ensure that you know this formula exists so that you can use it accordingly. Okay. All right. So we have example for growing perpetuity. You expect dividend next year Okay, next year, right? Given next year. So it's the cash flow next year, 1 year from today, right? As 1.3, dividends are expected to grow at 5%. So 1.3 is next year. This is important. So you know it's only one period from today. Okay. Grow forever at 5%. The discount rate is 10%. What is the value of this promised dividend stream? Right? So I hope you can see that it's a growing perpetuity. It keep on growing at 5%. So it's quite simple. You just take 1.3 divided by 0.1 given a discount rate minus 5%, and you get this. Yes, it is possible that the growth rate might be greater than interest rate. However, you cannot use formula anymore. You need to do the manual method. Manual method means that um yeah, you need to basically calculate the value of the cash flow until forever. You put it to infinity, and then you discount it back. But do not worry, there will be never a question asking you that, right? We will just use the basic formula, and this formula assumes that G is less than R. Now, earlier I mentioned that we'll do two valuations, how we value bonds and how we value stocks. Let's talk about stocks first, okay? The thing about stocks is that imagine you buy a stock, right? When you buy a stock, your stock gives you dividends every year or every half a year give you dividends, okay? And so when you receive dividends every half a year, every year, generally as the year progresses, your dividends would kind of increase over time, right? And so with this concept of increasing dividends, we can use the growing perpetuity formula to actually price, or we call it value a stock, right? So we use the growing perpetuity formula to value a stock. And this is, of course, the most basic way to value a stock, right? There's a lot of sophisticated way, but let's just go the simplest way. We use the growing perpetuity formula. And this formula in valuing stock is called Gordon growth model. Okay. So DV1 means dividends in year one, means dividends 1 year from now, right? We know that it must be 1 year from now because we are using the perpetuity formula divided by R minus G. So a very basic formula, please take note, is 1 year from now. This is a big start. If it's dividends now, they usually give it as DV0, means dividends now. And of course, we know that the perpetuity or growing perpetuity formula uses the cash flow 1 period from now. So we just multiply it by the growth rate to get DV1. Okay. So I hope you can see that, yes, we're valuing stock, but we're just using the most basic growing perpetuity formula, right? We're not introducing a new formula here. Okay, so we have a question here to illustrate this point. Suppose Big D just paid. So can you tell me, is this DV1 or is it DV0? Just paid dividends of 0.5. 0. Yeah, so it's now. Now equals to 0. Okay, you're right. It expects to increase dividends by 2% per year. If the market requires a 15% return, how much should your stock be selling for? Okay, so take 0.50 times 1 plus 0.02 because you need to get DV1 because you need to only use the cash flow 1 period from today divided by 15% minus 2%. Okay, you should get the answer of 3.92. So please read the question carefully, whether is it just paid dividends or dividends 1 year from today. Okay. All right. So now we tackle this thing called ordinary annuity. Right. So the idea of, okay, let's think about the basic of idea, what's an ordinary annuity. So the idea of annuity means that instead of a perpetuity, so perpetuity we get cash flow forever, right? in the annuity, you get cash flow for a certain period of time only, right? Meaning what? You get the cash flow for 5 years and finish. After that, you don't get any cash flow, right? So that's an ordinary annuity. Now, why is it ordinary? Is because the cash flow is being received one period from now. Okay, later we'll see what's annuity due. We have another option, but just put in mind that this is called ordinary. It means that it's just received one period from today. Okay? If you have an ordinary annuity, there's this formula given here, which looks kind of like the perpetuity, right? This is like a perpetuity, but you need add this like discount factor thing here. Okay. Good thing about ordinary annuity is that you can actually use Excel to do it. You do not need to memorize this formula. So what does this mean? Can you see ordinary annuity? It means that you have cash flow of 100, but it only happens 3 times, right? As you can see here, 3. At year 3, after that, finish, no more cash flow. Right? Again, it's important, of course, to say that the cash flow starts 1 year from today, as you can see here. Right? That's why it's called ordinary annuity. Okay. So we have an example here. You can afford 1,500 monthly car payments. What is the maximum car loan that you can take if interest rate is 5% for 7 years or 84 months? Okay, so now I think just now we had a few questions being asked. A few questions. First, can you explain what PMT? Okay, we're going to do this now. And then we have a second question is what happens if it's a monthly? So now we have a monthly issue also. Okay, so I'm going to jump to my Excel. Please follow me closely because this is an important example because it tackles 2 queries that we have seen earlier. What happens if it's monthly and what happens if we have payments happening now? Okay. So the question is, what is the maximum car loan you can take? So how much you can take now is a PV, right? So I'm going to pull out my PV formula here. Hope you can follow me in this example. Now, in the PV example, we know that the rate is, interest rate is 5% for 7 years. Now, this 5% is a yearly, right? It means it is a nominal or APR. But the question now is about monthly. So whenever we have issues with a question asking for monthly and give you yearly, the key, and this is a very important point, the key is to always reduce to the lowest denominator. And what does it mean? It means that if you have data in monthly and you have data in yearly, always convert everything to monthly. Do not convert it to yearly. So if you have yearly and semi-annual, convert everything to semi-annual. Okay? Always go back to the lowest denominator. This is the key. If you're going to convert it up to yearly, in this case, in this example, from monthly to yearly, your answers will be wrong. Because the issue is that you need to consider the compounding on a monthly basis and it makes your whole problem very complex. So this is an important point. You know, I've seen it in assessments in the last few years. They always give you different denominator, monthly, yearly. Sometimes, you know, it's like, oh, you know, maybe easier to do yearly. So you just take the monthly figure, you times 12, become yearly, right? Take the monthly figure times 12, but you have made the biggest mistake. And the biggest mistake is because you did not consider compound interest, right? So whenever you do this, always standardize it. So standardize it to the lowest denominator. In this sense, monthly. I cannot emphasize this more because it's one of those tricks that they, you know, try to get you. So always do to the lowest denominator. Okay. So in this sense, I hope I already emphasized it enough. So hope that in case they do try to test you in this way, you don't make this mistake. But in this question, let's go back to the question. They say interest rate 5%. So we know we need to convert these to monthly now. So 5% divided by 12. Okay, always convert the lowest denominator. Number of periods. we have 7 years. The question is quite nice. It says 7 years is 84 months. So we put 84 because everything now is in months, because we are converting the lowest period. Now, PMT, this is where the PMT comes in. Because we know that there's a standardized payment, there's a fixed payment of 1500. So we can actually put a 1500, and again, we put a negative now. I hope this comes to you naturally. It's a negative. Okay. Final value, you are making payments for the car, right? At the end of the day, there's no payment left to make. So it's 0. Right. The type again is 0 because we are doing ordinary. So we are not doing any funny things, ordinary. So it's at the end of the period. Okay. And there you go. You get this. So I'm just going to use the formula text so that you can see the formula, right? So I hope you can get this answer. So please, again, repeat. In this question, they are giving you monthly and yearly. Please convert everything to monthly. Okay? You don't make the mistake. Any questions before we move on? Okay, yeah. Good. Okay. Oh yeah, you're right. There's a slight difference. Let's see. Okay, I think it might be a typo on the slides. Yeah, let me amend that. It should be this. Okay, yeah, right. There's a small typo. Okay, so this one should be 7. Okay, so we have other questions. You are purchasing a car. You are scheduled to make 3 annual payments of 4,000 per year. The first payment starts 1 year from today. So this is good. 1 year from today, they will tell you. Given the interest rate is this, calculate what price of car you should be paying for. Okay. The solution is provided, but I would like to jump to the Excel since it's the second time we have seen this problem to actually show you how to do it. Okay. So let's pull our Excel again. We start with the PV. What is our rate? Our rate is 0.1%. This one is annual, so nothing to really be concerned about to change. In terms of number of periods, we have 3 annual periods. In terms of payments, what do we have for payments? We are supposed to make $4,000 payment, right? So we do 4,000 negative because it's payments. At the end of the day, we are not going to make any more payment, so 0. The type also is 0. So we have this, right? So we have one more question below. To look at our slides, but I'll not toggle over. So the future, you plan to save 3,000 every year for 4 years. Given a 8% rate of interest, how much will be in your account after 4 years? Okay. So now what they're asking for, how much will it be in 4 years, right? So your future value question now, right? Let's do it the future value. You are given a rate of 0.08. Number of periods is 4. Everything is in years. Nothing to worry. You plan to save 3,000, meaning money is going out of your pocket into your savings account. So minus 3,000. Okay. Present value, of course, you have nothing now. Your account is 0. Your type is 0, right? End of period. And you should get this answer. The solutions are provided. I hope you can see that small little square screenshot, so you do not need to copy anything, but hope you can understand the concept of it. Okay, so solutions are here, so you can have a look. Now, with the idea of ordinary annuity, we know that there's an end to the payments that we get. We can now price a bond. Okay, so this is the part where I like to explain what's a bond, because not everyone, is in finance or has taken maybe the accounting module, right? So I want to explain what's a bond. So a bond is simply a piece of paper. So usually how I like to explain is just a piece of paper, right? And this piece of paper is an agreement between two parties, right? For example, I buy a bond, right? I'm an investor, I buy a bond from a company. So I buy this piece of paper, and in return, I give my money to the company. Let's say $100. I give $100 to the company gives me a piece of paper to say that, hey, you know what? We owe you $100. So at the end of the bond, when it's matured, we simply swap. I return this piece of paper to the company will give me back my $100. Now, the question is, then where's my interest, right? I'm getting $100, I give $100, and then after maybe 3 years, I get back $100. So where's my interest? The interest comes in the form of this thing called coupon payments. So what does it mean? It means that along the 3 years, the company is giving you the interest. For example, every month, give you 10% of $100, means give you $10 not every month, sorry, every year gives you $10. This coupon payment is your interest on the bond. So this is the interesting thing about a bond, right? The interest comes in the form of yearly or semi-annual or whatever, right? Basically, periodic payments that's being made. The coupon is based on the coupon rate, right? And the face value of the bond, this is the amount that we exchange for the paper. So like what we mentioned earlier, right? I lend the company $100, the company give me a piece of paper. This $100 that we lend the company is the face value. At the end of the bond, when the bond is expired, you exchange back. So you return a piece of paper, the company return you $100. This is the face value of the bond. It's being repaid at the end of the bond. Maturity, of course, is there when the bond matures. That's about it, right? Of course, we are talking about the most simple bond. Those who have experience or have already taken more advanced finance mod, there's a lot of different kind of bonds. But let's just focus on the most simple bonds first. Okay, this is just the basic understanding of bonds. Okay. So with the idea of ordinary annuity, we can actually price bonds because they are simply just coupon payments, right? But what's important is that we need to consider the par value, right? Meaning when we do the final exchange back. So when we return the piece of paper and the company give us the $100 back, we need to consider this. And of course, this must be discounted as well. This is the only portion that needs to be amended when we do bond pricing. Okay, and R usually is this thing called yield to maturity, but it simply means the discount rate, right? So they use it interchangeably. Usually in a bond situation, they call it yield to maturity. Yield to maturity means the discount rate. Okay, we have a simple example of a bond here. Okay, what is the price of a 5.5 annual coupon bond with a $1,000 face value, which matures in 3 years? Suppose that discount rate is 3.5%. So this 5.5%, okay, now there's a few percentage, so you need to understand what's happening. This 5.5% basically is the coupon rate. So it's coupon, C-O-U-P-O-N, coupon. And we get the coupon value by multiplying the coupon percentage times the face value. So the coupon amount that we get each year is $55 coupon. And this is the interest that you get, right, in the bond. We know it matures in 3 years, discount rate is 3.5. So how do we price the bond? Let's pull out our Excel again. Please go to Excel. We are going to use the present value of the function, as you can see here, right? Present value. What's the rate? The rate is given at 0.035 or 3.5%. Number of periods 3, because it's a yearly. Payments. Now, what's happening? We have coupons coming in, right? So we have $55 of coupons for 3 years. Now, what is the FV here? Anyone like give a try? What is the FV? 1,000. You're right. Because at the end, what's FV? FV is the amount of money getting at the end. Remember, for bond, at the end, we need to do the exchange back, right? We have a piece of paper, we return the piece of paper, and then we get back our money that we loan the company. So we need to ensure the FV is being placed in. It's a positive as well because we are getting money, right? Type is 0. Okay. And there you go. This is your bond. So it means that, what does this mean? The negative makes sense. I hope you can see the negative makes sense. It means that at the start, when you buy the bond, you have to take out money and give the company 1056. Let's just say 1056 in order to get the bond and then get whatever coupon and everything and then get back your bond after that. So the negative makes sense because money is coming out at the start when you buy this bond. Okay. Okay. Next slide. Now, earlier we have always talked about ordinary annuity, right? Ordinary. Of course, there's a non-ordinary annuity, which is called annuity due. Okay, so this is where we do not assume the 0 at the end. Remember when we say type, I always say type equals to 0, right? When the question there say anything, type equals to 0. Now, we're going to tackle the issue of type equals to 1. What does this mean? It means that the payment comes at the end for ordinary, but in an annuity due situation, the payment slides over to the start. So what's happening here? It slides over to the beginning of the period. And because of that, we have this formula where we need to multiply 1 plus R in our ordinary annuity formula. So ordinary annuity, you just multiply 1 plus R. The good thing, however, is that you do not need to memorize this formula because you can use Excel simply by selecting type equals to 1. And that's all for all of our annuity due situations. At this point, I want to also emphasize that whenever a question do not specify whether the cash flow is coming at the end or coming at the beginning, it is assumed that it's coming at the end, meaning a ordinary annuity. Only when the question specify that cash flows are coming in at the start or at the beginning of the period, then it is a annuity due situation. Right? Okay. So next part, we need to know, like, your perpetuity, then your growing perpetuity. Now we need to know the growing annuity. So in this sense, it's the same annuity. You're getting cash flows for a certain period of time only, but now your cash flows are growing every year. So it's being grown by G. Okay. Whenever you have a growing annuity, I want to emphasize that there is no Excel formula to help you in this. So you need to know this growing annuity formula, right? And you can see, actually it's not too complicated. Can you see that, hey, this formula looks like a growing perpetuity. However, we just need to add this like discount factor in, right? 1 minus bracket 1 plus G divided by 1 plus R to the power of T, which is the total rate. So this formula kind of looks very familiar. Fortunately, it's an open book for all your assessments, so you can refer back to the formula if you need to use the growing annuity formula. But I just want to highlight to you that you need to know this formula. There's no Excel. Okay, we have an example given to you here. Let's look at this retirement plan, right? Offers you, 20K per year for 40 years. Increase with an annual payment of 3% each year. What is the present value at retirement if the discount rate is 10%. Now, we know this is a growing annuity issue or growing annuity example, so there is no Excel, so we need to use this formula here, right? So in the formula, we need to put what is C. C is your cash flow to 20K. We know R is 10%, minus G is 3%, multiplied by 1 minus 1 plus G, which is 1.03, sorry, divided by 1 plus R, meaning 1.1. And we know that the total number of periods is 40 years, right? And so we can get this. Okay. So, increasingly, because we are allowed to use Excel, right? Sometimes you might choose not to even use the growing annuity formula. And what you do is you just multiply all the cash flows by the growth factor, meaning that you really individually, not really individually, but because Excel quite fast, right? You just multiply like this, compound all the cash flows, get all the cash flows, and then you simply just present value everything, and you just sum all the present value. I think increasingly most people do that. However, that is a bit messy, it's not very nice sometimes. And occasionally, if you need to do 40 years, 50 years, 100 years, sometimes if you're in a rush, you might make a mistake, right? So, which is why, using this growing annuity formula is still important, right? Yes, you can use Excel, you can drag the whole row to do 40 times. You can do that, but it's not recommended. Pause here. Any questions? All right. Okay. Okay. Now we go to loans. You know what? Before we start, okay, maybe we just talk a bit on loans first, then we talk about calculations. Okay, so loans. We have three kind of loans here. We have the basic discount loan, interest-only loan, and amortization loan. So there's a bit on a theory part. So a pure discount loan, right? It means that as a borrower, you receive the money now. You receive the money today. Sorry, you receive the money today, and then you pay the lump sum at the end of the year or at the end of the borrowing period, including the interest. So what does this mean? Let's say you have a 1-year loan, 10%, right? Pure discount. So at the end of the day, if you borrow, let's say 1 million, at the end of the day, you need to pay back 1.1 million at the end of 1 year. And that's all, right? Pure, there's no payment in between. This is an example here, borrower was able to pay 2.25K in 5 years. I think as lender, you wanted a 12% interest on the loan. How much were you willing to lend today? So we just take, because you're asking for today, right? So we just take 25 because this is the amount that he can repay in 5 years. So we just take 25K divided by 1.12. Yeah, that's the amount that you're willing to lend. Interest-only loan. So what does this mean? Interest-only loan means that you pay the interest each period, during each period, okay? And at the end of the loan life, then you pay out the principal, right? So both are separated. So for example, you have a 3 years, 10% interest only loan, means that every year for the 3 years, you pay back 10% of 1,000, which is 100. And then on the third year, the last year, that's where you need to, of course, pay the interest as well. But you also pay back the principal of 1,000. And then you close off the borrowings, and that's all. Now, what's the most important is this part, thing called amortizing loan, right? Which is where we're doing a lot of our calculations. Or not a lot, but the main bulk of what we want to cover. And in the amortizing loan, what happens is that the loan principal is being reduced every period. It can be every year. It's being reduced. And so when you make payment, you both reduce the principal and you pay off your interest. So you pay off two things at one time. And this will cause the loan value to decrease over time, and hence we see some fluctuations. Okay, the best example is your home loan. Okay, I think before we calculate the amortizing loan, let's take another break. As usual, I like to do we like to do 2 breaks so that we have some break, kind of refresh yourself. So let's maybe come back at around 9:10, so 9:10 p.m. And we'll continue the amortizing loan. Okay, if you do have any questions, feel free to drop them in the group chat. We can answer them after the short break. All right, welcome back for the last part. So I don't see any questions, so I guess we are good. Let's move on to the amortization just before we have a short break. Let's try to create amortization schedule, right? So I encourage you, after today's lecture, try to come up with amortization schedule at least once on Excel to see really how it works. Okay, so we have amortizing loan here. $1,000 loan. Okay, it's going to be amortized 10% annual rate with 3 equal payment, right? So relatively simple. The first step in calculating amortizing loan is to actually calculate what is our monthly payment. Okay, so our monthly payment is fixed throughout all the months. In this sense, I think it's year. No, they didn't say year or month, so it's just 3 equal payment. So it's being fixed for the whole period. So we use the PMT formula now. So this is the first time we're using PMT formula. So you know what? Let's pull out our Excel to see how we do the PMT formula. This is the first time doing it. So we pull out our PMT function to calculate what's the payment per period in this sense. We do have a rate of 10% that's given in the question. Number of periods is 3. Right? The present value is 1,000 because we are getting the money from borrowing from the bank or the loan. So money is coming into our pocket, positive 1,000. At the end of the day, the future value is 0 because we are not going to pay, after the 3 periods, the loan is fully paid off, right? So there's no money left. Again, we have 0 in terms of type because we are paying at the end of the period. We get this. And it makes sense, right? Negative means that money is coming out of our pocket. So every period, we have to make a fixed amount of $402. Okay. So after doing this, I'm going to just skip these calculations and show you the table immediately, and this will provide you a better understanding, right? And then we can jump back into see the calculations, but by seeing the table is a lot easier. Okay, so let's try to understand what's happening in this table. First, we start with a beginning balance, right? We borrow the money from the bank, 1,000. We borrow 1,000. Now we know that every period, in this sense, I guess is years. Every period, we pay a fixed amount of 402 based on our PMT formula. So we can put in the values as given here, minus 402. Now, the thing is, because it's an amortizing loan, the 402 that we're going to pay would be a portion to the interest amount and the principal amount. Remember what's the difference between amortizing loan? Amortizing loan, during each period, we are going to pay off the principal as we go along. And this is what's happening, right? So the question is, how do you determine how much principal is being paid, how much interest is being paid? To do this, we simply take the interest percentage, which is 10%, multiply 10% multiply by the beginning balance. So in this first period is 100. Now, in terms of the principal payment, we now take 402 minus 100, which gives you this, right? And so if you notice, the total is 402, right? The total must always be 402. Now, then because we have paid off 302 in terms of principal payment, our ending balance becomes less, right? We take 1,000 minus 302. And then this ending balance goes to the beginning balance for the next period. For period 2, again, payment is the same, right, as we calculated using our PMT formula. Now, the interest would then be 10%, I'm just going to use a different color, 10% of this amount here, 70, right? It's being rounded. So if you are doing this for assignments, Excel, of course, don't round the figure, use the full figure. But for this table, I just have kind of make it a bit simpler, right? Just round off the figure. Now, in terms of principal payment, you just take 402 minus 70 gives you 332. The beginning balance, we just take the 332 and the big and here, right? So we take 698 minus 332, we get 366. So we keep on doing this, right? And what do you notice? You notice, okay, I'm just going to erase all these lines so it's easier to have a look at what's happening here. So what you notice is payment remains the same as what we mentioned earlier. But you see that the amount of interest that's being paid over time decreases, while the amount of principal that's being paid increases, right? So in aggregate for each period is always 402, but the amount of the 402 being split in terms of principal, amount that is being split in terms of interest changes over time, and in terms of principal increases, in terms of interest it decreases, right? But what's important is at the end of the day, you see your full principal is being paid off 100%, all gone. You have no more loan at the end of 3 years too. So this is the visualization of what's happening. And this is a typical example of a amortizing loan. Okay. There's this last component that I'd like to discuss, and this relates to inflation. Okay? So now, in this economy, I think inflation is one of the biggest topic. Everyone's complaining, oh, the hawker center prices are increasing, food prices at the grocery stores like NTUC is also increasing. So, inflation is one of the big topics, right? So let's just formalize a bit more understanding of inflation here. So inflation generally is the rate of increase of prices as a whole. Okay? It is measured using the CPI index or consumer price index for the country. It measures the inflation. And whenever we talk about the APR, right? Remember APR or nominal rate is nominal interest rate. It means that it's the actual rate that the money is growing. But the question is, yes, maybe you invest $100 in a fixed deposit that gives you 4% interest, but does it mean that you can buy 4% more goods after 1 year? And I hope you all can straight away say that no, right? You might be buying less than 4% worth of goods. And that's because your 4% has been eaten up by inflation. And so the idea is that we want to calculate what is the real interest rate. And the real interest rate takes into account inflation, so much so that you have the actual purchasing power of the rate that you get, or your actual purchasing power of the investment. And that is your real interest rate. So it takes into account inflation in the interest rate, right? So in order to get your real interest rate, we need to use the Fisher equation, all right? And this is the Fisher equation given here. So Fisher equation is 1 plus nominal. So this is the nominal component, and 1 plus R is the real, and 1 plus I is the inflation rate, right? So you just plug in the figures, do your algebra to find your real interest rate. At this point, I want to highlight to you that it is a compulsory to use Fisher equation, and you cannot use the approximation of inflation taught in online or other textbook, right? What does the approximation means? So some people say, okay, what if my nominal rate is 10%, my inflation is 3%, my real rate is 10% minus 3% equals 7%. Now, this method is not accepted by the school because we have taught you Fisher equation. So this method is a approximation to quickly kind of find out what's the rate. If you use the Fisher equation, you get a rate very similar, but it's not 7%. So please do not use this method. This is a wrong method. We use Fisher equation, which is the accurate method of calculating real interest rate. Okay. We do have an example of Fisher equation here. So, if the interest rate of a one-year government bond is 5%, the inflation rate is 2.2%, what is the real rate? We plug in the values as given. It's not too complicated in terms of calculation. We can get the real rate given here. Okay, this part is important. I want to highlight to you. Now, whenever we are dealing with actual dollars, right? Like, for example, all the questions that we are dealing with actual dollars, so far, whatever we're talking about is actual dollars. We always use nominal cash flow. And when we talk about nominal cash flow, we always use nominal rate, right? So whatever discussion we've been talking about has been on a nominal basis. Now, given that we have kind of now know what is inflation, there's a possibility that we want to work with constant dollar. And when we use constant dollar, it means it's the real cash flow. And when we talk about real cash flow, please use the real discount rate. And we have an example to show you what it means. Okay. So the whole idea is that if we are talking about something that's real, in a real sense means you want to include the inflation into the investment, always use real rate. Whenever consider more nominal sense, just focus on nominal discount rate. So we have a good example to explain to you what does this means. Okay, so suppose you own a lease that costs you 8,000 immediately, okay, increasing 3% a year, which is the forecast inflation rate, for 3 years, for 3 additional years, so total of 4 years. If the discount rate is 10%, what is the present value of the lease in nominal cash flow? So we want to use the nominal discount rate. Okay, so let's draw the timeline to kind of understand more about this question. So 0, 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, we have a 4 timeline. The lease costs you 8K immediately, so 8K, and it keeps growing, right? So yes, you get 8K, but I want you to know that about additional 3 years, sorry, no 4, just 3 years, additional 3 years. Okay. Okay, I'm looking at the questions a bit tricky, so I'm just reading. Increase 3% a year for 3 additional years. Okay, 3 additional years. Okay. But now we need to include inflation here, right? At 3%. Okay. So in nominal terms, I'm going to the next slide. In nominal terms, it means what? We're going to use the nominal rate. So we're not going to adjust this rate. So the discount rate, this is your APR, right? Which is your nominal rate. So we're not going to adjust them in real sense, in real terms, meaning what? If we're not going to adjust the rates to real rates, we need to consider the inflation as a growth factor G. Okay, I'm going to repeat this again. It might be a bit confusing. Let me repeat this again. So the first part of question asks you, what is the present value of the lease in nominal cash flow? When you talk about nominal cash flow, means that you must use the nominal discount rate. And what's the nominal discount rate? Is 10%. And because you're using 10% as a nominal discount rate, your growth or your inflation must be considered part of your growth, because your cost is increasing by the inflation, right? So your G is your growth rate, G is your inflation in this sense. Because of that, use a growing annuity. However, it is a due situation. I'm going to put a star here. And why is it a due situation? Because you're receiving the, not receiving, you're going to pay the lease on year zero, and it's an annuity due. Hope you can see that. It's an annuity due. And remember, whenever it's an annuity due, we simply just multiply by 1 plus R. This is 1 plus R, and that's all. Okay. Now, given that we are in a situation of a growing and annuity, of course, the due is very taken care by this. Growing annuity, we know that a growing annuity has no Excel formula. Hence, we have to use the growing annuity formula given by this. I'll pause here. Any questions regarding this nominal cash flow? Okay, no questions. Okay, so maybe you might have more questions when we go to the next part of the question. So the next part of the question asks, what is the present value of the lease in real cash flow terms? So I'm just going to use a different color in real cash flow terms here. And so what does this mean? In real terms means that now we need to use the real rate. And when we say real rate means that we need to use the Fisher equation to get the real rate. And so we now put in the nominal rate, we put in the inflation of 3% to determine what is the real rate here. Now, we know that we have already taken into account inflation in our rate calculation in order to get the real rate, right? We have already taken inflation into account. Hence, we are actually in a situation of a annuity due because we already taken into account the growth of, not really a growth, but we already taken into account how inflation will eat up our return, right? By determining the real rate here. Can you see the real rate is less than the discount than the nominal rate, and that's because inflation has eaten up our returns. And so we have already considered the 3% that has been eating our 10% nominal returns. And so we only consider the annuity due and not the growing annuity in this sense. Because the portion that's being the inflation that's eating out our returns has already been considered in the real rate calculation. It makes sense, right? Can you see that the real rate is less than the nominal? However, it is not 10% minus 3% equals 7%. Can you see that your 7% is a close approximation to 6.796%, but it's not the right answer. All right, no problem. Yeah, in case you need to leave, yeah, feel free to. So just remember, watch the lecture recording. Okay. Okay, so we do the annuity due sense that don't need care about growing annuity. However, for annuity, you can either use the formula given here, and then you include the due component, which is 1 plus R. And in this sense, the R is the real rate. Or you can just use Excel and ensure type equals to 1. Okay, I'll encourage you to Excel. Do not need to use this formula. In a nominal sense, you had no choice. You have to use the formula because it's a growing annuity. However, in the real cash flow, because you have already considered the inflation as part of your real discount rate, you can just use the annuity due, and the annuity due, you can use Excel to do it as given here. Any questions? I'll just pause here again. Okay, so we have one more example. Let's look at this example here, right, on inflation. You have reached the age of 60 with a modest fortune of 3 million and are considering early retirement. Okay? The nominal interest rate is 10%, inflation is 5%. So how much can you spend each year for the next 30 years, assuming that spending is stable in nominal terms, right? You want to ensure nominal stable income. So what do you do here? I've written some explanation, right? Since spending is stable in nominal terms, it means that your spending is fixed yearly, but because of inflation, it's going to eat up how much you can really spend, right? So you only can buy less and less product each year. Of course, the first part is on nominal terms. It's quite simple, right? If it's a nominal term, we just use the nominal discount rate, which is given the question. I'm just going to flip over 10%. So 10%, 10% rate, nominal rate. We have a 30-year. We currently have the 3 million that we have, right? At the end of the 30 years, you have no more money. So FV is 0. The type is 0 as well because it's not a due situation. You're just doing it as a normal sense. At the end of the day, the nominal cash flow that you can receive, 318K in nominal sense, right? Of course, you know, in the actual spending per year basis gets less and less, right? Because every year is being eaten up by inflation, means that you maybe next year you only can spend 300K, maybe next year 280K. It keeps on getting lesser and lesser, right? Because inflation will eat up your money. But in nominal sense, you are going to get 318K. Now, there's a second part to the question. Assuming spending is stable in real terms, right? Now it's in real terms. What is the amount you withdraw for year 1 and year 30? Okay, so now we are tackling a situation in real terms already. So whenever we tackle a situation in real terms, it means that you should maintain the same quality of life, right? Meaning you have to take into account inflation. And to do so, we need to calculate what is the real rate. So we have the Fisher equation again. 10% is a nominal. You know inflation is 5%. Your real interest rate is 4.7619. I hope you can see that you need to use the Fisher equation. You cannot use the approximation formula of 10 minus 5 plus 5. That's totally wrong. Right? So once we have the real rate, we can determine what is the real payment you receive every year, right? And what does this mean? We input the number of periods 30 years. Initial is present value is 3 million. Your rate is the real rate given here. Okay. Your final value, of course, at the end of your whole 30 years of retirement, you have 0 money left. Type is 0. And we see that the payment, we only can get 189K, right? 189K or 189,890K. No, K, sorry. 189,890. And before we go on to this part here, let's ask ourselves, does this make sense? It does, right? Can you see that comparing with the nominal amount that you get is much lesser? And this makes sense because inflation is supposed to eat up your money, right? So in real sense, you actually can only spend 189K versus 318 in nominal sense. And this makes sense, it's lesser. Right? So we know whenever you solve questions, try to ask yourself at the end of the question whether it makes sense. And in this case, it makes sense. Right? But the question did not ask you about what is the real payment you get every year. The question is asking, I'm just going to flip back the question. What is the amount you can withdraw from the account in year 1 and year 30? So in year 1, this is in year 0, right? The payment you're going to get in year 0. Now we know that every year you need to draw out what 5% more money in order to maintain your standard of living of 189K. Right? So in year 1, you need to multiply by 1.05 in order to maintain your standard of living of 189K. In year 30, we need to draw out, we need to multiply 189K by a compound period or compound interest of 30 periods in order to continue maintaining our standard of living of 189K. So, i.e., long and short is that every year you keep on having to draw out more money in order to ensure that you still can maintain your lifestyle requiring 189K per year. So I have a question, sort of question here. So why is real rate in year one and year why is it um 1 plus 5%? Because your inflation is 5%. Your inflation is not 4.7619%. Remember, your 4.7619% is your real rate, but your real rate actually considers the inflation that is being adjusted, right? So in actual fact, in order to maintain your life, you need to adjust for the inflation per year, which is at 5%. That's a very good question. Yeah. Remember, when you're calculating your real rate, this is the real rate, right? And this is used to calculate your payment you get. But actually, what's affecting your real rate is your inflation. So every year you just need to adjust the inflation amount for 5% for year one and 5% to the power of 30 for year 30 in order to get the actual amount that you need to withdraw. Yeah. Okay. Any other questions? So this might be a bit difficult to understand. Do not worry, feel free to look through the recording again. It will be posted as well. And it might give you a bit more clarity. Okay. So, actually that's all I have for the lecture. So again, this is so Unit 2 is one of the most important units for the entire module because it's on time value of money, right? So I really encourage you to, if you are still a bit unsure, review the lecture recording that we have. But not only that, remember that there's a lecture 2B that has already been posted on our module. And it's a mandatory lecture recording to watch, right? And so the lecture 2B does not cover any more new materials. Basically, it goes through more questions relating to all the various formulas that we have covered, right? So it really gives you a more deep dive in terms of using the formulas and how to use it in Excel. So I encourage you to watch lecture 2B. It's very I would say comprehensive. So hopefully there is no you don't find any major issues. However, if there are major issues or you're too unsure, do not hesitate to drop me an email, or in the next lecture we can spend the first 15 minutes answering any questions that you have for lecture 2B. However, so far usually there is no questions regarding lecture 2B because it's just applying what we have studied at the same time, also just going through really step by step and showing you every single process of doing Excel for this module. Um, okay. All right. So let's just see. We have some self-review questions. This one is not part of lecture 2B, so kindly just review yourself. Quite a few self-review questions. And yes, um, actually that's all I have. Any other questions or any concerns regarding the module? Any feedback? Do you think it's a bit too fast? Do you like me go slower? Pace is okay. Okay, that's good. Thanks for feedback. Yeah, okay. Yeah, so generally I try to pace it a bit slower and try to elaborate more, even those certain concepts. I think some of you who have more finance background, more accounting background, kind of already know it, but I really try to go back to the basics because I know that the class is a good mix of people from everywhere. I think on the first lecture we talk about supply chain people. We have HR, we have general business. So I really try to tailor the class more to really elaborate even basic concepts so that everyone is up to speed in terms of understanding. Um, and so, hopefully the pace is good. Seems like it's quite good, so it's okay. Okay. Yes, yes. Remember to change that 20K, 20K accordingly. Yeah. Okay. So in exam, based on past exam, usually you can bring your laptop to use the Excel and do calculations in Excel. But what you have to do is you have to copy and paste the Excel formula into the online exam like bracket, right? It's like you submit the your answers online, so you need to copy and paste it. So um the thing is, oh, oh yes, you're right, you're right. So actually you're right. So sorry, so last year is you copy and paste it. Then last semester is written. You're right, it's written, but you can bring your laptop to use Excel. Yeah, you're right. So um I'm not too sure what is this year's format because there seems to be quite a few changes in terms of the assessment. In fact, this is the first year that you have a not first year, sorry, the first semester that you have a quiz instead of a TMA, which is the first time. So there are a lot of changes to the format. I do not want to provide you the wrong answer to the assessment format, but if it's based on last year, oh, sorry, not last year. If it's based on last semester, is a lockdown browser. You can use your Excel to calculate, but then at the end of the day, you need to write the formulas and everything in your answer sheet. No, no. Uh, Remember, when yeah, okay, yeah, that's growing annually due. Okay, so that's the cash flow starting at the start of the period. Yeah. So let me just check, since we're just a bit more time before we end for today. I'll just check. We do have your class test, right? I think it's already posted the class test date, so everyone is yes, 29. Yeah. Okay, so just take note of the class test date. We have one more unit to go through before the class test. So yes, it's online. It's online. Yeah. So encourage you if you do have some time during this period to start reviewing lecture one and lecture two, particularly lecture two, because actually lecture three is also a bit heavy. So yeah, give yourself enough time. So it's 10 MCQ, not too bad. But just beware that it will have quite a few calculations as we see that lecture 2 has a lot of heavy emphasis on calculations, right? So again, remind you to look through lecture 2B that has been already posted. Okay. Any final questions before we call it a day? not in a moment. All right. So, final reminder, please reach out to your GBA groupings, group mates. Ensure that you establish contact with them and do not wait to the last minute and then you have a lot of issues with the grouping, you can't find this person, etc. So please reach out to them as soon as possible, establish some contacts, and then from there, when you have studied the materials, you can do the GBA. All right. If there's no other questions, I think we'll call it a day. I know it's a bit late as well. Some of you are also working tomorrow. So thank you for coming for the lesson. Don't hesitate to reach out to me if you do have any questions. All right. So have a good evening. Rest early. Thank you.